Okay. And we are live. It's just waiting for participants to come in.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this sunny Wednesday afternoon. We are really looking forward to this afternoon's presentation, but before we go any further, we'd like to begin today's session the way that we begin all events at Georgian College, and that's with our official land acknowledgement. Georgian College acknowledges that all campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Georgian College is dedicated to honoring indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So for everybody that's on the call that's meeting me for the first time today, I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Jamie Campbell, and I'm the manager of Alumni Engagement, Annual, and Legacy Giving here at Georgian College. And I'm joined by my colleague, who's the associate alumni engagement person for our team as well. And then we're also joined by some special guests here today from our alumni community. First off, we've got Maria Artuso, who's a 2001 Business Administration graduate, and she's currently the community manager with the Milton, Ontario RBC team. We've also got Hilary Anderson, who's a 1991 Business Administration accounting graduate and is currently the Chief Human Resources and Support Services Officer with your neighborhood credit union. So a few housekeeping items before we turn the call over to our special guests today. I just want to let everybody know that today's session is being recorded, and should you have any questions, you can certainly access resources following the call today. If you happen to have questions throughout the presentation of our panelists, please feel free to put those questions in the chat function on the call today, and there will be an opportunity for some Q&A at the end of the discussion. And then also note that many of your questions have been submitted through to our panelists ahead of time to ensure that your learning outcomes are being met with the discussion today. So the hope is that following their presentations, you'll have the information that you need to meet some of your learning outcomes for your presentations and your reports. But again, should you have any additional questions, please feel free to chat them to drop them into the chat menu, and our guests are happy to answer them for you at the end of the call. Before we hand things over, Sean and Eric, have I missed anything before we hand things over?
No, I think that's great from our side. Anything else there, Eric?
All good, I believe.
Excellent. So without further ado, I will thank everybody for joining us on behalf of our alumni community of more than 87,000 graduates around the world and growing. We're so pleased to invite you to the presentation today. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank Johnson Insurance for supporting us with our panel today. So over to our panelists. Erin, I'll leave things to you to take it from here.
Thank you, Jamie. And I'm going to hand it over to our call consultants so that they can begin the panel and answer or ask questions of our amazing panelists, Maria and Hilary, today, to help with learning more about their experience in business.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Erin. On behalf of the Co-op and Career Success team, we are so happy to be able to be partnering with the Alumni Advancement team to put this panel presentation on. Students, thank you for coming. Thank you for connecting with us today. As your co-op consultants, Eric and myself are excited about some of the information, the feedback that we're going to be sharing with you today. You know, for many of you, you've already been in touch with Eric and perhaps maybe even Aaron around this event, and you'll need to be taking some notes as you go through this. But one of the things I also would like to just point out, I don't know if you know, my esteemed colleague, Eric McRae, is also a graduate of Georgian College as well. So not only is he working and helping to help support you in your plans, but he's been down that road too. Anything you want to say, Eric, before I start with our panelists?
Thank you for putting me on the spot, Sean. I really appreciate that. Nothing specific for me, but I do know that when I was a student, I was a graduate of the HR program, and I actually went to a couple events that was held by the college, and I didn't go into it expecting a job. I didn't go into it really expecting anything, but I found that just learning from people and graduates and understanding where they came from and kind of hearing about their career path or what they know now or the roles they've been in, I found it really beneficial just to see, hear about that experience and then I could apply it to myself going forward. And that's what we hope you guys get out of this panel presentation, is just some information and some clarity in terms of how you can approach your co-op search in the future or your career search in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. It's been a real pleasure working with you. And he has a lot of great ideas. So students, what we'd like to start off with is if you could please ensure that you have the learning outcomes from your co-op project for your program open, okay? While we have these interviews, while we have this time with our guest panelists, okay? The learning outcomes were included in the link that was provided with the co-op project instructions. It's kind of part 2, okay, of the co-op project. So just before I move on, I'll just give a brief moment to see if there's any questions regarding that. And I'll just wait a moment. And if not, then I'll move forward with the beginning of our questions with our panelists. Okay, so what I'm going to begin with is I'm going to start off with the business, the BUSG, and the BADM learning outcome questions, okay? So we'll start off with that. I'll start with 2 questions from that set of learning outcomes, and then we'll move to the business accounting. So be prepared and make some notes, folks, while you listen to some of the responses. Okay, so we'll start off with this first one. The first one is with the expected change in operations management, especially as we see with the result of COVID-19. Hilary and Maria, what are some of the new changes that were made to continue to work in an efficient manner in your workplaces? And maybe just second to that, are there any new practices in place that you believe will maybe even stick around after this pandemic has ended?
I can go if you want.
Sure, that'd be great.
So I actually am going to use my experience, although I'm with the credit union now, I was with the healthcare organization for 20 years. So I'm going to go back to that experience just because I know it a little better. I'm on day 15 in this new organization. So I think there's a number of things that are going to change as a result of COVID. And so with respect to new changes in healthcare, I think digital care, obviously, virtual care is something that became more prevalent through COVID than it was previously, as well as even being on Zoom. In the healthcare world, Zoom meetings didn't happen. There were people that I had worked with virtually on TCONs for 10 years. I'm in London, they were in Toronto, and I didn't know what they looked like until COVID came and we got this thing called Zoom or MS Teams, and all of a sudden I was able to know what they looked like and sort of have a different relationship with them from that perspective, just because I got to see what they look like on the screen. I think that with respect to many organizations, what will continue is people working from home. I think that many roles that can and have figured it out over a year will continue to have some flexibility in their workplace in order to continue working from home where possible. And the need for organizations to have offices for every single person and big bricks and mortar buildings, I think will change over time. People will share offices, there'll be drop-in spaces, places for teams to connect, but in a different way than they have perhaps in the past. And then with respect to healthcare, I think a lot of the virtual care that we very quickly had to ramp up in order to serve patients will continue post-COVID. And hopefully that means people can get faster, better, more efficient care, and people can get care within their own homes, and we're not asking them to leave their homes when they're already sick to see a doctor or see a specialist post-surgery or those sorts of things.
Excellent. That's really good, Hilary. Yeah, it's interesting what we've been faced with and what that might mean, even carrying forward in the future. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But there are maybe some silver linings that come as a result. How about yourself, Maria?
It's interesting, actually. I don't know Hilary, and it's a pleasure meeting her. And what she was saying in terms of the healthcare, I'd say in banking, we're not dissimilar. And so I think about, what we did at the onset. So everybody was equipped with a phone and a laptop. And we evolved what we would call a soft phone so that we could actually connect with clients through our laptop. And what was interesting is that was probably piloted like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And here we were in 2020, and we were putting it into action because of sheer need. And, we, if I sort of personally reflect or professionally reflect, I'd say we're probably about 5 years advanced than where we were pre-COVID. And consumer-wise, our behaviors changed, and we didn't have a choice but to wrap our arms around digital, whether we liked it or not. And so it was no longer okay to say, my grandma who's at home and she's 81 can't do digital. Well, grandma's got an iPad, and it's pretty amazing what you can do with an iPad or a phone. And then I think about, we talked a lot about, removing biases. Remove your personal bias to actually help a consumer move forward. I like what Hilary said. We're not coming back into, I'm in a branch today, but I'd say a lot of my partners who filled the offices and roamed the halls are all at home. And so we really don't foresee that changing anytime soon. And frankly, I'm not sure I'd like to go back to how we used to do things. And so we often hear, if it's not broke, why are we fixing it? Well, I kind of feel like this new norm that we're in will serve us really well, efficiently, productively, but we're finding this new groove of work-life balance. And it does feel a little different. It is, it's probably not what we set out to be, but I think, fast forward 13 months to where we are today, we're in a much better place than we were before. And there's no looking back. And not to say that a global pandemic was a great thing, but boy, did we learn lots, having to shift gears and be as agile as possible.
Wow, that's really interesting. And to think, it's probably 16 months ago, if we had said, well, let's get together over Zoom, and we'll have a meeting next week at 1:30. How many would actually show up? They're like, oh, I think I did that webinar kind of thing one time. What did that look like? But now it's the norm. It's interesting. And there's a lot of people saying, wow, I didn't realize how possible this was. Let's keep going. Let's going. So my next question I'd like to move towards looks at maybe some standards, practices, and protocols that we see in the industry. And it's interesting because I think when we started, we didn't realize we were going to get two people from the financial services sector. So, there could be some commonalities here, but just make sure you're not, competing with each other about this. So, but the next question is, so we see, of course, business professionals overall need to work in a manner that's consistent with standards and protocols. We think consistently with legal, ethical, professional standards, practices, and protocols. Could you tell us how that applies to the kind of work that you do? And maybe start off with you, Maria, and then to Hilary.
Sure. So in banking, we're highly regulated. I mean, we've got this thing called a Bank Act, and then we've got designations that are monitored by regulatory bodies, and we've got this thing called FinTrack, and we've got anti-money laundering, and I would say there's probably 100 things, and I'm not going into acronyms, but highly regulated. And really, at the end of the day, there isn't anything that somebody in banking should ever do thinking that they'll get away with it. Nothing is swept under a rug. And so, we have designations that are monitored. We have transactions that are monitored. I think about COVID, and now we've gone into this digital world, and how do we minimize fraud? And so, that's a highly regulated, part of what we do. And so, the question being really around our practices and our protocols and how does that apply? It absolutely comes down to doing what is right with every single colleague and with every single client. And, we are not in the business, and nor should anybody else be, where you product push or you sell for the sake of a widget and $1 at the end of the year that actually doesn't align with what a client was asking for or wanting or anything like that. And so it's really important that at the end of the day, what we do, what we share, the advice we provide back to the basics of banking absolutely aligns to an individual, to its core, to their core. We live in a box that is quite structured. We don't live in a creative sort of environment where we make up rules on the go, by no stretch of the imagination.
How about you, Hilary?
Okay, well, I won't speak to financial institutions because Maria did a great job there. I'll speak to the healthcare. Again, regulated. Almost every healthcare profession is regulated in some way, with the exception of our personal support workers. We were funded by the Ministry of Health, and so there's very specific directives and rules in place with respect to that funding and how it gets used and how it gets distributed. So again, a very regulated organization. And then within my own areas, within the LIN where I was, I had both the Human Resources team, which of course is regulated through Employment Standards Acts. And I also had the finance team. So of course, then we're talking about financial accounting and the principles there. So again, rules and protocols to follow. But again, I would agree with what Maria said in that it really just comes down to doing the right thing for the organization, for its employees, for the patients that we serve, and for the tax dollars that we held in order to ensure that we were using them in a manner in which we could support and defend publicly. So yeah, very regulated.
Excellent. And, it's interesting. We do have standards, protocols, and these kind of systems in place for a lot of different areas. Eric, is there anything else that you would want covered around those kind of questions that we haven't covered so far before we move on to a couple of accounting related questions?
No, I think you both did a great job in providing detailed answers and making sure that it covered basically everything we were trying to get out of the question. So I appreciate it.
And I think too, even from our perspective, just working as educational practitioners, I mean, there are standards, protocols, and practices that we follow, even in trying to ensure that, for an example, co-op students get their credits processed properly and that it meets particular accreditation standards and all those kinds of things. So, here we are dealing with those kinds of issues even within the educational field as well. So folks, for those of you who are in the business accounting programs, the BACT or the BAAC, if you could pull out your learning outcome questionnaire, questions there. We're going to start to look at that here. And so I'm going to start off with this first question, and maybe I'll go to you, Hilary, first to start off with this, and then Maria. And so this next question is in the planning and directing and the controlling of an enterprise. Hilary, you have the opportunity, I guess, to speak on both the LIN as well as the credit union here, if you want. But there's often a requirement to evaluate management control systems and procedures by employing management accounting techniques. So I am asking here if you could tell us what accounting techniques a professional in your field or even a co-op student would use. And if you want, I can come back to any part of that question if you prefer.
Yeah, no, I've got it. So I'm going to hope that I answer this question adequately, because it's been a while since I pulled out my textbook and looked at specifically the management accounting technique. So here we go. It's a test. I would say that there's a number of management techniques that we use on a regular basis. And there would be things like observation. There would be things like analysis. There would be tracking of, it could be transactions, it could be processes, policies, procedures to ensure that we're understanding the controls that are in place at each of the stages. And therefore the outcome is what we're anticipating. So from a co-op student perspective, if I were new in an organization or even starting a new role, the things I'd be doing is a lot of observing, a lot of asking questions, and a lot of reading of policies and procedures in order to sort of get a handle on the controls that are in play. Does that help? Did I get close?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Maria, I know, although you work in a financial services industry, I'm not sure, it doesn't sound like you're directly related to accounting practices, but I just wondering if you have any insight in terms of, things that you've heard in your sector or things that maybe a co-op student would use.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Sean. And so I do not declare to be the accounting expert in any sort of way, shape, or form, but I would speak to, there's a risk management framework that we use when we lend money. There's a risk management or investor profile framework when we help clients invest. And so there are ratios that, we would lever and push and pull on and certainly chat with clients around. And, again, they do roll up into this highly regulated environment that we work within. But I'd say, we are bound by the frameworks provided. And then we've got risk management parts of the organization who then fulfill on higher requirements that we have, to make sure that we've got, low write-offs, and we continue to be within parameters that serve Canadians, and we, continue to lend good money, and we don't over in debt or provide too much debt to somebody who can't fulfill obligations. And so as much as they're not strict sort of, controls, we do have controls in place, but I would certainly not have, or be equipped to make those changes or levers, because it's an organization-wide movement, but good to know that they are there, and we just don't overextend, because we are shareholders, and so are Canadians, and so we do have a board that we are committed to, and so that's where our obligation is at the end of the day.
And I think in a lot of ways too, these are kinds of systems that are put into place for the professionals in the field. They may not necessarily have the inner working of how those calculations come about, but maybe perhaps within the systems that the representatives are working with their customers on, or their clients or membership, that's been built into play. And so for people that have that business accounting background, it's definitely going to make sense to them as to why those kinds of questions are being asked. Like, for an example, if someone raising their debt ratio too high, they're not going to qualify for particular services, for an example. So things like that. Now, again, this is a little bit more of a technical question as it relates to accounting. So I'll just throw it out there. I'm not sure how much insight we can have on this next question, but I'll put it out there anyways. We'll see what we can do here. But the question is, how are you able, or how are people that work in your field, okay, able to communicate clearly and effectively with clients about tax liability? This is a specific question that business accounting students sometimes will experience as part of their co-op. They may get involved in a particular way around tax liabilities. So perhaps maybe either yourselves or people that you work with in your institutions, what strategies would they use or you use to ensure that there's a clear customer understanding of what their tax liabilities are?
So I'll just declare, I have not dealt with tax liability specifically, but I could probably speak to the portion about the second part of the question around what strategies would we use to ensure a customer understanding. And again, I'll leave financial institution to Maria, but in healthcare, and I think it applies anywhere actually, it is about speaking in a language in which they understand. So, acronyms, technical terms, really small charts that they can't read, short forms don't actually help communicate what you're trying to communicate. And so I think it's important that you understand who your audience is and you speak the language that they understand and show them the information in a way in which it is meaningful to them.
Sean, I think what I would add is, we could take what Hilary said and apply it to financial services, because it is about no jargon, no acronyms, language that makes good sense to our consumer or our clients. But I think in addition to that is, it's really important that I don't pretend to be a tax specialist. And so that's why we have tax experts and tax specialists, and that's not me. And frankly, we have, great partners, and we have external partners that we would leverage for those. But I think what's really kind of important is that, clients understand the impact of tax. And so I guess I would sort of share a story, and I'm not sure where you were going with other questions, but I will share this story is, we have the great pleasure of having personal clients, and we've got the pleasure of having business clients. And, in order to pay tax, you also need to do your taxes, and that's for both sides of the balance sheet. And when we choose not to pay tax and we choose to get an earning that is in a cash equivalency versus a T4 income or however we get paid, that also plays into how organizations are able to lend money to you. And so if I go for a period of time without declaring income, but yet I'd like to, see if I qualify for a certain amount of money, whether it's to buy a home or a new car, I do need to have earned income to show that I'm making money that'll pay for my debt obligation. And so, I would say again, you can't have everything. So we're cash flow lenders. And so in order to lend money, you need to have cash flow. If you would like to use, the equity in your home, that's a little different than using cash flow of dollars earnings. And so I guess I'll reiterate is we do have tax specialists. We don't and should not step outside the box of our expertise, because we do have great partners internally and externally to leverage. But I'd say go back to consumer understanding is, if you only make X, then you get to lend on Y, and we'll need you to pay back. And so that all needs to come back into some type of I think we talked about risk management and control systems. That's another box we live in.
Yeah. And it's interesting, here we're asking these questions and we're trying to relate this in the consideration of perhaps maybe customers or clients pursuing some of the services that are available in some of these ways. When we think, and then this is a good segue in terms of financial decisions. A lot of our business accounting students may go into different co-op jobs or even career pathways in the future, whereby they could be working with a variety of different businesses, and those business leaders that they may be working with need to make some very clear financial decisions about where are we going, in the future, in terms of what, where are we going to make our investments, or what if we start this particular business initiative? How are we going to make this decision? So in terms of how they arrive at that decision, and maybe this is a question that you could comment on. Can you think of examples, perhaps, of how in your business and in your professions you've seen people that you work with, or even yourself, apply principles of financial analysis, financial planning, financial control, just to help the organization, right, in making those financial decisions?
That's a big question, Sean. I'm not sure I'm ready there with an example, but if Hilary's got one on her toes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, so again, I'll go back to working for the Lynn. So we had to make financial decisions all the time. We were only allocated so many dollars and had patients to serve. And the organization was in, a big portion of our business was home care. And so getting care within your home, and not a patient isn't a patient isn't a patient. And so every sort of service plan that was determined for a patient had a different dollar value attached to it. Unlike a hospital that has so many beds, home care, really the number of patients that needed home care could be the number of people in our boundary region. There wasn't a cap. And so we did have to look at historical data. We had to look at current data to make some analysis and make some assumptions based on trend or COVID, to determine where we thought the financial trends were going to lead. And so I can tell you, in a world of COVID, it's February of 2020, and you're thinking that the year is going to be a normal one and things are going as planned, and all of a sudden the province is shut down. And so what does that mean? Well, it means there are healthcare staff that are too scared to go to work, don't want to go, can't service the patients. And it means there's patients that don't want to have people coming into their home. So how do you guess how many that's going to be? How do you anticipate what that's going to look like? How long is this going to go on for? I don't think in March of last year we would have said that we would still be, in that situation now. And so, we honestly made assumptions. We made our assumptions clear. And we watched very carefully, and we didn't get our assumptions right every time, because we didn't think we'd be doing this a year later then. And so all we could do is work with the information we had at the time and make the best calls that we could. And if patients weren't going to get care in their home for a number of reasons, then we had to brainstorm other ways that patients could get care, and then sort of try and figure out what would that cost and how could we make that happen. And so it was sort of the truest test in financial projections and financial reporting, I think, that I've ever had in my career, because nothing was the same as what we thought. There was no comparator out there. We couldn't say, well, in 2018, we had a similar situation. What what percentage decrease did we see in usage? There was nothing to look at. So, you know, I think you gather as many inputs as you can, and you make some reasonable assumptions, and you monitor it carefully.
Good. Yeah, that's some really good points. And folks, you know, I think about all the different types of work and programs and initiatives that are out there, whether it's, you know, working in a mental health facility, or it's social work, or let's say you're even working in entertainment. If there are not, you know, proper checks and balances, and if there isn't proper analysis of, you know, what's happened in the past, and what does this mean for where we are today, and what are the projections for the future, that could drastically affect things. I mean, I know Lady Gaga just about, you know, went totally bankrupt, and then because she had enough resources to keep going, and she was able to get some proper accounting help, imagine that, she's been able to be more successful. So it doesn't matter, seem to matter what sector you're in, you're going to have to use some financial analysis to look at, okay, well, what kind of decisions do we need to make going forward? Maria, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this point?
Yeah, actually, Hilary sparked something in my mind, and the principles that Hilary just spoke to at sort of 100,000 feet in the healthcare industry, we can absolutely take and apply on a personal level. And so here's what I would say on a personal level is, you know, when you think about someone planning for retirement, you know, you take into consideration, well, what is that magical age, and how long am I going to live to? And, you know, what's my life expectancy? What's inflation rate? How much am I going to get for CPP and OAS? And what do I really qualify for? You know, do I consider an inheritance or not? Am I the golden child who's getting everything, or do I need to split it out with, you know, other individuals? Do I have dependents, you know, who I need to care for sort of now? And are there other obligations that I have? And if retirement is my end goal, but I might have another couple of things that I want to do in the meantime, you know, that all takes planning. And so I love, you know, Hilary's focus on financial analysis at a high level across an organization, but it applies on a personal level, working backwards to say, I need X amount to live on. I want to achieve Y. And I got all of these things that I want to do and that are super important to me. Now, how do I make it all happen? And you're going to need to make concessions, because not everything can happen. And that's the reality of it. And so then it becomes, well, if these 10 things were important, well, now I'm down to 5. And if these 5 things are important, what am I actually A-okay to say no to, so that I can really focus on what goals and priorities are, and what they're, you know, what's really important. And so I think the same application applies. We just use different numbers, and they're typically smaller and not, you know, 10 digits long. They might be 6 or 5. And so that's, but it's the same application.
Excellent. Okay, so folks, I think what we'll do is we're going to move back to another one of the business related learning outcome questions. So there's from on your page, I think it's number 7. I'm going to ask a question about cross training. And so with the increase in cross training among companies, where people now have to learn a lot of multiple roles, and I think for myself, and just working with a lot of our colleagues, you know, in and everything that's gone on with COVID, we're air traffic controllers now, you know, having to navigate everything. And when your system breaks down, you can't call IT. You have to figure it out, because your dog's not going to do it for you. But anyways, with all the cross training, what are some of the benefits, and what are some of the issues that might come up in the future because of this?
I'll take a stab at this, and then Hilary, I know will be a fast follow here for me. But I think what I would say around cross training is, it's not okay not to be cross trained. And so I think if you think about how fast our environment is changing, you really do need to be, you know, a jack of all trades, and wear multiple hats at one time. And so that agility and being able to sort of go from, you know, this conversation to another, or this transaction from another is really important. And our environments are such that, access to specialists are not within the house anymore. They're phone calls away, they're, WebEx Teams away, they're not here. And so the more cross training we do, the better everybody, sort of works as we continue to evolve our roles too. And so, we're probably in a position as a financial industry that there's probably roles of the future that are starting to be thought about and are not yet here. And it's really just a matter of time until they are here and this cross collaboration or cross pollination between roles really comes to light and benefit. One of the questions that you'd also asked was around, what are the issues that might come up? And I'd say an issue or a challenge that one might be faced with is cross training is really great as a generalist. So you know a lot about a lot, but you're not necessarily a specialist or an expert or have depth in one, sort of lane or line, whatever you want to call it. And so that can become a risk for someone who, when faced with the opportunity of experiences, one might say, well, what are you really a specialist in, or where do you hold your depth? And one may not actually have that when the timing is right for, for a new role or that sort of thing to come up. And so, there's a lot of benefit right now of getting cross role exposure, but one at some point may be at a risk of being too generalist and not enough of a specialist as you think about the evolution of positions today in companies.
I really love that. That's interesting. And, I think I've been in co-op area for a little over 10 years, and I've actually seen students who have had the opportunity to go through cross training and be exposed to a variety of areas, whether it be through one co-op where the employer will give them exposure to a lot of areas, or maybe it might be perhaps through the multiple co-ops that they may have. And sometimes they will actually say, you know what, I know that was not for me. I didn't like that. And in some ways I say, that's just a valuable learning outcome as realizing what you are good at. Because in some ways you can say, okay, well, that's not my area of strength. Well, then maybe that opens up something completely different, right? So yeah. So Hilary, did you have something to share about that particular question?
Yeah, I really like Maria's answer. I think when she started off by saying that, it is important that people are cross-trained. We need to have the flexibility within organizations. People do call in sick, people go on vacation, and there's key roles that need to get done. I think as an employer, it's important to understand that there are employees that want to understand something deep. They don't want to be generalists, but of course they want to be a team player. And so how do you balance, someone's going on vacation for 2 weeks. How can you pick out the key functions of their job that someone has to step into to get through 2 weeks versus someone has to do all functions of their jobs? And so, looking at what are the priority things that people are generalists at, but then you have more depth and knowledge below that in certain areas that might be different depending who you are on the team. And that's hard to get right. And it's easy to say someone's only going to go on 2 weeks vacation, and sometimes people leave. And so then it's a longer thing, but it is about trying to balance. And I think what Maria was trying to say, balance the need to be team players and support a team, but also trying to figure out where your strengths are and as an employer wanting to focus your attention on those strengths, because that makes people succeed. So there's pros and cons for sure.
Excellent. We'd like to maybe target just a little bit on business marketing, and just to try to look at maybe how this is impacted or been impacted, by everything that's been going on with the shifting in business. I know there was a report that was done across Canada around the volatile uncertainty of the business world these days. But this was actually said before COVID, and then COVID hit, and it's like, well, now we really know what that's about. But my question here is kind of two-part. How do you think the ability to provide customer service has changed with a lot of companies shifting to online delivery of their businesses. In your case, it might be online service provision. And how do you think marketing has changed in recent history with the change to this online delivery?
I guess I would say that I think it's more important now than ever to have a relationship with your customer. And so without that, I just don't see how people are going to have any loyalty if I can, and it could be anything. It doesn't have to be the industries that we work in. You know, if Amazon treats me really well and I can get what I need and it comes within a really short period of time and my customer experience is fabulous, then why would I order from another company? So I think it's going to be all about the customer experience and getting people to experience your experience to get them to draw them in. And then you got to figure out how to keep them. And that's the experience part. Yeah.
I'll jump in here. I think those are pretty good questions there, Sean. So I think I'll go with customer service. So, you know, if we've gone to this virtual online piece where I can't actually, you know, physically see a twitch, or I can't see body language change, or I can make assumptions from what I'm seeing online. I think, you know, we can still do a really bang up job around customer service. I think where it might have changed a little bit is around my tolerance level as a consumer has decreased in terms of how much time you're taking to help me with whatever I need. And so being really respectful of this commodity of time, which is a scarcity, and we all have, you know, limited amount of time to do things. I think it really comes down to, you know, if I'm going to pick up the phone and call Hilary, why am I calling Hilary? What's my value add? What's in it for Hilary at the end of the day? And why does Hilary care that I've made the call? And so I think it comes down to, you know, ensuring Hilary has the time, the patience, the wherewithal to have a conversation. But also, I really have a shortened amount of time to make an impact virtually and or by the telephone and or in person. You know, to make sure that I'm helping, I'm adding value, and we're making a connection, and it's exactly what Hilary's looking for at the right time. In terms of marketing, and I'm not a marketing expert and I avoided it like the plague, but I think what's kind of interesting around marketing is I'd have to say marketing has probably touched me more personally recently in the last year and a bit than ever before. I think there's a real human element of marketing. I think it's very raw, but it's very real. And so all of a sudden I can probably relate to a lot more advertisements, pictures, sayings than I could have probably ever related to before. And it's not fictional, it's the real deal. And so I would say that as a consumer, social media gives me a little bit of angst, how I can think of something and it's sort of, you know, an advertisement appears in my feed is a little, you know, outside my brain space. But I think it comes down to, you know, tolerance of how much time I'm going to spend there. And just in time is how marketing and advertisements are really functioning. And so I think it's kind of cool. I think I, as a consumer, need to evolve in that space when it hits me personally, but I really like the human element that a lot of marketing and advertisements are having today.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, in a lot of ways in today's world, because of the way things are being delivered online, it's almost instantaneous in the sense that, you know, as soon as the people that are working with the information have it, customers have have that information as well. So, you know what, this is so exciting, and students, you know, this is great to be able to connect with graduates of our programs here. I'm just so thankful to have you on board to share with us and to give up your time for this, Hilary and Maria. what I'd like to kind of sort of close this time out with, and before we go to the audience for some other questions that the audience may have, is can you tell us your story? Like, how did you get from the program that you took at Georgian? Okay, you graduated, and now you're where you are now. And like the depth of answers that you are providing is so valuable. But how did you get there? Like, how do you now know all of this, and you can share this amazing feedback? Could you just tell us a little bit of your story? I'll start with Hilary.
Oh, geez, my story. Yeah, so I graduated from the Barrie campus. I had done my co-op with the city of Guelph, all 3 co-ops with the city of Guelph, but was moving to London as soon as I graduated. And yeah, I got a job with the city of London, and I did work at the Royal Bank actually as well as a I was teller back then, but MSR now. And I, honestly, it was just a job came up. It was in a long-term care home run by the city of London, and it was a financial job, and it was a assistant manager job. And I just thought I can do that. Well, I could do that. And I did it. And so then it just sort of built off there. So yeah, it was, I guess, always about wanting to learn. I think I've continually learned, finished my CPA, CGA at the time, but always continuing to learn. And taking courses and learning how to be a better leader, learning how to be a better manager. For a while, I actually left finance and got strictly into business intelligence, but again, took courses on how to do that work, how to analyze that data, how to streamline things. Then came back into finance and then got into HR, and so I think the most important thing is you learn from every encounter, and you learn from everybody you meet, and even the negative experiences teach us something. And so I've just been really lucky in my career, and I have enjoyed every not every day, but every role I've had. There's been real contentment in my work, and but always wanted to grow, always wanted to try something new, always wanted to learn more.
Excellent. Wow, I like that. Just willing to try it and see how you could build on
Yeah.
things, and the aspect of the continual learning, and continuing to build on the work that you were doing. See those themes there. How about yourself, Maria? How did you get to where you are now?
So
From
completely
Georgian.
by accident, and there was no rhyme or reason. And so I think what I would maybe share is, I was purposeful in taking the business administration general program because I really didn't have a direction. And I really, I had heard a lot of great things and had actually older friends who had been to Georgian. And so it actually, I didn't have to go looking for other post-secondary schools to go to because I had some firsthand experience of Georgian. And so that's how I got there. In terms of the program, it was absolutely because I didn't have a clear destination or kind of place I wanted to be, or didn't really know who I wanted to be when I grew up. And so, when you ask the question of how did I get to where I am, I say that as a type A personality, I didn't do a very good job structuring my career. But I would say that the flexibility and just being open to, experiences or opportunities has really served me well. And then I'd say the professors who I had at Georgian were really great to bring to life real life experiences. And so, I think about a prof who was a banker at one time who, could have been my dad when standing up in the classroom with me. And, he spoke of amazing banking experiences, good, bad, and ugly. And, that was kind of an interesting play. And then, we had in evening classes, I had really great individuals who spoke to HR, and it scared the light out of me. But here I am today. HR every day is sort of the way we live. And so, as we think about the story that Georgian does, well, your network first and foremost expands that much more. And then you get to decide how you give back from, I love what Hilary said around continuous learning. And you always have a place at Georgian, and there's always something to learn. And so I've actually gone back to Georgian for a couple of courses, including a motorcycle course, by the way, which may not be on the grid, but I'm just saying. So Georgian and experiences. But I just say, it's okay not to have a game plan coming out of Georgian or in Georgian. Just be open to not being so narrow-minded and so fixated on something that your blind spot is actually an opportunity knocking on your door, and you just don't take it because you're so fixated on something. And 23 years ago, I couldn't tell you that I'd be where I am. I had other aspirations, but I'm okay with exactly where I am because it's been an amazing ride.
Excellent. Wow, that's really neat to hear. This, I feel like there's a sense of an adventure, that's come out of, your experiences in your career. We've got a couple of questions coming in the chat here now. So this would be a good time to transition and take some questions from the audience and from you students. So students, if you're wanting to put something in the chat, please do so. I'm going to start off with the question that came in here from Jagdeep. She, I think, relates to changes that COVID has brought into your jobs. What changes do you think are good and should be carried forward? And how do you cope, or how do you keep up? Maybe how do you keep up with those changes?
I can go. Changes brought into the workplace. I think the flexibility for being able to work from home, I think, is a good change. I think if you had asked me 18 months ago, could I send my entire HR, finance, and IT team home to work and still have the organization function in the way in which it was, or better, I would have said, you are crazy. Absolutely not. And we decanted about 700 people to their homes within 7 days. And so I just think that that's phenomenal. And I think that that will be something, I think, the working from home again. I don't think I think there are some roles that need to be where they need to be.
And actually, maybe Hilary, maybe if I could just interject here, because I think you actually brought up a point that Inderdeep asked, and that is, how do you ensure that productivity continues? Maybe I'll just pick up on that too, just as you were relating.
Well, as a leader, you would know, you're aware of what your team is working on. And so there might be key performance indicators in place that you're tracking. It could be through regular check-ins with your team to see where they're at. It could be with deliverables that, if I didn't see the financial reports by a certain date, I knew something wasn't happening that needed to be happening. And so I think there's many different ways, but I think the most important way to ensure that productivity was happening was connecting with my team on a regular basis.
I'll sort of jump in here too. I would say what never has to change right now is cross-training. And so that cannot go by the wayside. I mean, we can all figure out generalist or specialist down the road, but right now it is so important to wear multiple hats, as things can happen sort of really quickly. There's places that shut down because of COVID. And so if you send an entire workforce home, I'm less concerned about their productivity and more about their safety on the onset. And we'll, talk about productivity, but it's how do you toggle between I have a desktop and I got to go to a laptop and I don't have my files, and how do I work digitally and how do I connect with people? And so what am I going to talk about while I'm off for a couple weeks and we, get ourselves sorted out? And so this whole idea around cross training is absolutely critical. And I hope that we never go back to this singular role, singular mindset, because we've evolved so quickly and so well there. I'd say as a leader, what's interesting is I'd probably tell you selfishly, I'm much closer to my team today than I was, 14 months ago, because we talk more often. I don't spend time on the road. There isn't this like, okay, give me, 45 minutes to get to you. But we solve things on time in the moment. And we probably have more vulnerable, authentic conversations than ever before, because nothing's really that structured. Everything's kind of on the fly. Like, I need to talk to you. Let's get a video cam and here we go. And I hope we never go back to a place where it's, okay, I'm going to be here for a couple of hours and, who am I going to spend some time with, or what do you want to talk about? Like, everything is just raw in the moment, but real.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to go to Alec Johnson. He's asked a question here. What resources do you use as a company to ensure that you are distributing your services and products to the largest audience?
Hilary, I'll jump on this one, and you probably. So I'd say for us, we have, any financial institution has multiple channels of distributing that, and so I think about, if I'm the person who never walks into a bricks and mortar, then how do you get to me digitally? Through social media, through channels where artificial intelligence picks up behaviors and activities of me as a consumer. But yet the other thing is we still have call centers who do thousands and thousands of outbound, inbound calls. We have multiple platforms who, depending on sort of the line of business and the specialization, really do reach out individually to the consumer based on what their line of business is. And like I'd say, as we all carry our phones, and that's so critical, is how do we use the applications that we have to really drive the consumer behavior or feed into the consumer so that it's easy. And so the distributing of the services and products, I'd say there's a lot of knowledge and information that comes your way, but we do still believe in the human element, that we can't go 100% digital, although there's lots of components that get there. But the human element really drives some really great advice, but available information for consumers to digest before we get to a human element in the middle of a conversation or a transaction or something. You still need a human there to fulfill on a lot of things.
Do you have any thoughts, Hilary, about and Marie, about what kind of financial careers do you think will be blooming in the coming years?
Did you say booming?
Well, I thought it was booming, but the individual put blooming. So maybe either one, booming or blooming. I don't know. Blooming almost has the feeling of something that's new. It hasn't happened before. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of the thought behind that question.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I just haven't thought about it. I don't know, Maria, do you have any?
Are either one of you familiar with the Aspire Challenge?
Inspire Challenge?
Yeah, so Aspire Challenge, for the sake of some of our students too, you can go on to the website aspirechallenge.ca. It's actually a conglomeration of financial service industries that are represented in partnership with educational institutions across Canada to look at how to improve work integrated learning, to address the labor market shortages that are found within the financial services sector. And part of these are some of the sort of trends and questions that are coming out of that whole challenge, and it's actually funded by the federal government. But they're looking at the huge shift and transition that's going on. This was even pre-COVID, but now COVID is almost accelerating that. Like, what does this now look like in terms of the kinds of ways that we, financial institutions provide services to their clients, customers, membership, right? So I guess that's a question, like maybe the person that was a teller on the front in the beginning, or some years ago, is no longer, the same thing. And we're providing that service in other ways. So does that actually create a different type of career within the sector?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. And I think it's less about sort of that teller, but more about what's happening in our environment. We see more and more individuals being self-employed and starting their own business, which is really cool. And then there's, trillions of dollars that will exchange hands over the next 10 years through generations and through family businesses. And so, when you think about a financial career, I'd say planning is really one that's growing. So I think, commercial banking, where more and more individuals are in startups and growing. I think about planning because how do we manage trillions of dollars that will exchange hands in the next in the next decade? And then I think about IT sector and being on the leading edge of something digital. And like, that's not going away. And so, if there's individuals on the line that haven't really made up their mind, I'd say there's probably roles that, exist today that will look a little different. There might be even more hybrid roles. That's the other thing I think about when you use the word teller. Our client advisors today do one heck of a great job, and they do way more than I did 23 years ago when I was a teller, and way better than I used to ever do it. I just wasn't equipped. And fast forward to today, it's one of, the most noble, aspiring roles you could possibly have to get into banking. But I think about, what changes, like, oh my goodness, it'll be in, you pick a sector, you pick a specialized line, they will all boom in some fashion because people will still be required at the core of all we do.
I don't know if you had anything else there to share.
I think Maria did a great job.
Okay.
I think she did a great job. Yeah.
Okay. One of maybe the other areas we haven't touched on when I'm looking at some of the questions, I think Ria brought this up and Inderdeep brought this idea up as well, and that's around mental health and stress and just the toll that some of the work is taking on people now. Even when we would go to work at the college and we would go from one meeting or one event or one class to the next, at least we'd have a little bit of a break. Maybe on the way we could stop and talk to someone or grab a coffee and then go to the meeting. And now it's like, okay, well, I go to a meeting, and I'm in one meeting on Zoom right up until 12:55, and I'm trying to rush through that so then I can get to the next Zoom meeting at 1 o'clock. It's like there's no break between one to the next. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts around the work that you're doing with your colleagues? What kind of toll is this taking on people, in their mental health, and how does a manager or how does a leader or a supervisor help mentor their staff or coach their staff through some of those challenges and stress right now?
Yeah, I'd love to take this one first, Maria, if that's okay. So even pre-COVID, which you're right, has added a whole other element. We recognize that as an organization, so again, back to when I was working with the Lynn, as an organization, we were focused on people's attendance at work, but we weren't focused on their wellness. It was always about you're sick, you're not at work, but we weren't doing anything to contribute to their wellness. And so really wanted to focus our attention on being well. And so we actually brought in someone who was an expert at setting up a wellness program in a large hospital, and we stole her and brought her into our organization, and she spent the first number of months just learning what people wanted. And fast forward now to a COVID world where everybody's remote, but most meetings start off with a stretch. And there's videos. It doesn't have to be live with her. If it's not a stretch, it's a breathing exercise just to get people settled into place. When we were in the office, walking routes were established. So if you walked this route around the office, that was 1 kilometer. So if you did it twice, you walked 2 kilometers. There's at lunchtime now, because most people are home there, they're doing a cooking class for 30 minutes on healthy cooking. They're hand exercises, which sounds crazy, but it was to prevent injuries from being at your computer all day, and getting carpal tunnel or other things like that. And so it was focused on the areas that caused the organization the most risk. Mental health was another big one, that we tried to provide all kinds of information and services and make it a safe place to talk about what was going on. I mean, we had people and it's, I'm sure, true in every industry. We had people on Zoom calls here and their kids are doing kindergarten, sitting next to them. And, that's just got to be exhausting as a parent, to having to try and manage your career and your child's education at the same time. And, just when you think they were going back to school, they'd be back home again. So we just really focused on our employees and cutting them some slack where we could. You need to stop for an hour at 11 o'clock to do this class, then do that. You want to take a few minutes and walk around the block, do that. And we modeled it from the top down, to make sure that everybody knew it was okay, everybody knew it was safe, and really focused on the people, keeping them safe, both from COVID as much as we could, but also keeping them safe as much as we could from a mental health perspective by offering these other alternative things that we try to do within their workday. We offered yoga classes a couple of times a day, including after hours, just free, and it was all through Zoom. And so trying to give people a variety of things, not everything appeals to everyone, but a variety of things, so you could pick the thing that was meaningful to you to try and give you some sort of balance in your day.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, those are some great thoughts. And I know that many times, being the employer relations consultant, it's trying to reach out to different employer partners throughout this year, to talk to them about hiring our co-op students or to help them in their partnerships with the college. And I'd be having a meeting with a vice president, or I'd be having a meeting with a manager, and you have this meeting, and well, they've got to take care of their elderly parent, or they've got to take care of their child who's sick, or they've got to take care of their animal, and it's all happening while you're trying to conduct business. And we just need to be sensitive that there's a lot of additional mental health issues because of the isolation that people are experiencing that they weren't necessarily prepared for. So there's all this going on while we're still trying to conduct business. So I'm just watching the time. We've got about 15 minutes left. And I know if you were in a typical interview, you probably wouldn't have gone this long if you were interviewing for a position, students. But thank you so much, Hilary and Maria, for being so patient and flexible with this. I'm going to actually ask my colleagues, Aaron and Eric, if there's anything else that, any other questions that we haven't covered yet on this last few minutes that we have left together that you guys wanted to ask before we start to wind up.
Yeah, I am seeing some questions in the chat. So if we don't get to your question, guys, Some of the questions I'm actually seeing in the chat we've covered earlier in the session, and the session is being recorded, so we can send it out to you afterwards. And I think that once you go over it again, you're going to be able to hear answers to that. One question I did have for Hilary and Maria, if you guys don't mind, and it seems kind of, I'm covering a couple questions that have been asked at the same time with this, but the consistent thing with students is that they're kind of asking what you guys expect from a co-op student entering the professional workforce, possibly for the first time. So this, you could go back to when you were a co-op student, or if you've taken on a co-op student before, but what qualities do you look for, and what do you consider a successful co-op student?
I'll kick this off because Hilary did a bang up job on mental health and all this. You know, I would say you need to be excited about where you're going. So I can't help you be excited and motivated to show up every day. But when you come in with, the right attitude, it gets you a lot of mileage and a lot of credits. We can technically support you in a ton of ways. We can show you the ways. We can virtually be shoulder to shoulder. We can, be in the weeds with you. But, a great co-op student is one who's engaged, participative, a team player, a massive collaborator, somebody who's willing to skin knees and try things for the first time. We don't need, I said we collectively, because I think Hilary would agree, we don't need you to show up knowing everything, but we do need you to show up with, the personal goods that got you the role in the first place, which is part of your DNA, which gets you out of bed every day. And we need you to have a growth mindset. And so, if you're asked to try something, take a new experience on, be open and willing to learning, I would tell you, rolling of eyes don't get you a lot of credits, or stiffness doesn't get you a lot of credits. And when we get to provide evaluations and feedback, it is, those kind of techniques or behaviors really do carry through as you find your way and as you kind of figure out what you're going to do as you get older. And I would say the last thing is, open communication with a coach, a leader, a manager, having them on your side, asking great questions, being curious is a great co-op student.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Hilary, did you want to add to that or?
No, that was brilliant. I would just say someone who asks questions, and Maria got to that. So that's, we can't train attitude, but we can train all other skills. Yep.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Well, I'd like to turn that question on its heels. And I'd like to ask Mr. McRae that question.
Oh, geez.
Because Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? You were a student, you were a co-op student at the college, and look at you, you're now working. And what kind of attitude mattered for you when you went through that process?
Oh, geez, thank you, Sean.
I know, you just love that.
So I'm a graduate of the HR postgrad program. I was what you would call a lazy co-op student, as in I was not as active as I needed to be. But what I found that I was like that because I didn't have experience in the professional workforce. I didn't know how to properly apply for jobs. I didn't really understand the process because me not paying attention, being nervous, whatever it was. I eventually landed in the career hub at the Georgian college, and I was trying to wrap my head around the idea that I'm going to be looking over resumes and cover letters for the next 4 months in a concrete room. And that was basically I went in and I was like, this is going to truly be terrible. I just have to get this credit and then I can graduate from Georgian. And after that, I showed up my first day and it was just such a positive environment. And then I fed off that, right? I was like, I want to be with Georgian from here on out. And I told the person I was working with, who was kind of my mentor, and said, no matter what I do, I want to be with Georgian. So what are the steps I can do to do that? I came in with a positive mindset every day. And my thing that I kind of did was I tried to identify weaknesses or like things that people might not be as good at and become proficient at them. So we have a thing called SharePoint here at Georgian. Nobody really wanted to use it because it was a new technology. And I was like, I'm going to learn it. So I'm going to learn it. I'm going to know how to do everything about it. And 2 years later, I'm the SharePoint guy. So it's just an additional resource, right? So you want to provide value in what you're doing. And then it'll also help you when you're working every day and you're going like, that's me. Like I can answer these questions. I can answer these better than anyone else, right? So beyond that, and without boring everyone, I've been at Georgian for close to 2.5 years. I've been in 9 different positions. I've worked 3 positions at the same time, all for 11 hours each. And I've used to commute an hour and 10 minutes to Georgian Orangeville for 10 hours a week. I've done just about everything you can imagine. But I knew Georgian was my goal, and that's been it ever since. So I think that a lot of you will be confused or uncertain with where you want to go. But I assure you that your first co-op or your second co-op, you're either going to learn a really great lesson of where you want to work, or you're going to learn an equally important lesson of where you don't want to work. But either way, it's a positive experience. Just take from that what you will, and then learn from it more than anything else.
Excellent. Oh, wow. That's amazing, Eric. I really appreciate you sharing that. And, I think of all the, probably I've been in 6, 7 roles, I think at Georgian in the last 10 years. And I just love cutting our teeth on a lot of these issues. And it's been great working with Eric. I know for myself, when I came out of university, I had to do an internship, which was very much like a co-op. And, myself, very similar to Eric, I found a problem and I studied that and I came up with a study and tried to figure out a way of solving that problem. Well, that ended up opening up all kinds of opportunities from there, and actually started to forge for me the career pathway that I wanted to follow. So you never know, where those issues may come from. But sometimes a problem or a challenge can be turned around into an opportunity in your career. And use the co-op as a way of doing that. So at this stage, I'm just put it back to Eric and Aaron. Anything else we need to finish out with here?
I'm good. I think this has been fantastic, and I can't thank you guys enough for being a part of the panel. And it's a great experience for the students. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I would just mirror Eric's comments. I think this has been, I've learned so much from Hilary and Maria, you guys, and Eric's story as well, apparently. I really want to thank you guys for your time today. I learned a lot. I love the message of having a positive attitude going in. And I apologize for, I have a north-south facing house. I know, right?
You loved it so much. You're just glowing.
I loved it so much. I'm glowing. Absolutely. I know for myself, I've been with Georgian for 3 years, and my journey has taken me through all kinds of different employers, positions, everything, to end up in your alumni office and working with amazing people like Sean and Eric, and then working with our alumni, Maria and Hilary, to connect students and work with different departments. So yeah, positive attitude and open mind. I love it. I love those messages. But yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing your stories with us today. I really appreciate it.
Is there anything else, Hilary, Maria, that you'd like to say that we didn't cover before we finish up our time?
Maybe I'll go. First of all, I wish everybody on the line just continued amazing success in all you guys do. Thanks for the opportunity to have me be here. But I would say don't get lost in any of this and continue to be yourself, because it's yourself that employers want. And if they love you for you. They don't love you for who you are not or who you aspire to be. And so don't lose your personal self in any of this journey that you're in, because you remain the most important person and human in all of this. So don't lose sight of that, even when you want to. And sometimes you fall below the line. Don't buy property below a line. Just keep above a line and stay the course, and just don't stop being yourself.
Good one. I would echo the thank you for being here. I mean, it's great to actually get to reflect a little bit on these questions. And I guess the one question that I did see popping up a little bit was, what makes a great leader? And I guess I would just leave with the thought that we talked about being open, and we talked about you know, being energetic and engaged and being yourself. But I also think relationships are important, and you just never know where they're going to take you. And so take the time to get to know the people you're working with. And even if it is for a short period of time, you never know when you might need to reach out to them again in the future. And building relationships are like putting money in the bank. And if something doesn't go as well as you had hoped, you can withdraw. And if you don't put any investment into the relationship, then you've got no money in the bank. And if something doesn't go so well, you know, there's nothing to withdraw. So I would just say focus on relationship in all areas of your career.
Excellent. That's great.
Great point.
Well, folks, thank you so much for your time. 2 hours is a long time to be on Zoom. So for our panelists, our guests, for our team, as well as all of you students, as you're watching here today, thank you so much for taking the time. Hope this will be quite valuable to you as you move forward in your plans and your assignments and what you do to forge out your career pathway. On behalf of the Co-op and Career Success team, we would just like to thank you for taking this time to share today with our students, Maria and Hilary. Thank you for setting this up, Aaron. And on behalf of the Alumni and Advancement Office as well, thank you for putting this on today, and wish you all the best. Okay?
Care,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Bye now.
Have a great day.